Hey everybody out there, this is Seto, and today for you guys, I'm going to be profiling for you one of the most powerful decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. This is probably one of the most powerful decks, if not the most powerful deck in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and that is 2004 Chaos. This deck created the ban list. When I do this deck profile, if you are familiar with the ban list of old or ban lists from the past, pay attention to how many cards are still on the ban list and how many cards were at one point on the limited list or on the banned section. Also, I do want to mention, before I get to this deck profile, guys, I did play with this deck a lot recently with some friends of mine, just against other broken decks, just to see how good the deck is still, and it's a very powerful deck, even in this era with all these older cards and the power creep in this game. It's such a powerful deck. Also, I want you to please keep in mind, these are the pre-errata forms of the cards, so when they were at their power, not neutered or anything. Second off, you have to keep in mind a couple of things. Priority was in effect at this time in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And number two, you did get your draw in your opening turn. So do keep those things in mind. But I did get a chance to play this deck even back in the day, right before the ban list actually happened. We didn't know there was going to be a ban list. At that time, back in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, you had something called the limited list and the semi-limited list. So literally, imagine the ban list without the banned section. You only had the limited section. So like, there was a lot of limited cards, but no banned cards. So we had accumulated a lot of cards. I mean, I was 14 years old at the time. I had been playing for 3 years already in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I did go to regionals. I did go to my locals, which was very competitive, gaming parlor back in the day. A local card gaming parlor, excuse me. But literally a couple of friends of mine, about 3 or 4 friends, we pulled this deck together and we got a chance to play it for about 3 weeks, and then the ban list happened and then we couldn't play the deck anymore. So I got to play it for about a week because I got the deck for a week. We each traded off the deck for a week to play it. One of my friends did play it at regionals. I watched him play. It was devastating. This was a deck that literally, it won games, and it power creep so much other decks out there at that time, as well as it pretty much, I've always said, it made special summoning no longer special because of these two guys right here. But if you guys are wondering also where the heck is Dark Magician of Chaos and where is Chaos Sorcerer in the deck, you could run those in that deck, but I pretty much tried to make this deck realistic to what people were running back then, historically. That's what I've tried doing with these decks that I've built historically recently. So I built this deck last year, and I've been playing it for over 1.5 years now. It's very fun to play. But if you wonder what Chaos Sorcerer is and Dark Magician of Chaos is, Dark Magician of Chaos at the time was considered not worthy to run. It was considered too slow at the time compared to these two. And Chaos Sorcerer nobody paid attention to until a couple formats later, because literally at that time, these two were better than Chaos Sorcerer. So do keep these things in mind from back then. So first you have your Chaos Emperor Dragon and your BLS. These were the main focus of the deck from that era, the main power plays. Pretty much what you would do is set your graveyard up, whittle your opponent down to like they had used most of their resources up, and then you would drop the Chaos Emperor Dragon, and then you would drop the BLS, vice versa. These were your boss monsters / win condition. So you whittle your opponents down on their resources and life points, then you smack down the big boys and just put the nail in the coffin for your opponent, so to speak. So Chaos Emperor Dragon and BLS. This is one of my original Chaos Emperor Dragons I've had forever, from back in the day. That's actually the one that we used to run. Forgot about that. Next we have 2 DD Warrior Lady. This card came out of Legend of Darkness, I believe it was, a long time ago. It was before Invasion of Chaos, because Chaos, Dark Magician of Chaos, Chaos Sorcerer, and the Chaos monsters in general, they came out of Invasion of Chaos, which was probably one of the best sets in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day, and even nowadays it was amazing with the common cards and everything. But DD Warrior Lady was a problem solver. You could send it to the graveyard automatically if you activate Painful Choice, if they didn't choose it, thus setting up for your light and dark targets, but I'll talk about Painful Choice later. But DD Warrior Lady was a problem solver. Jinzo was a big thing out there in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! At that time, and you know, the other Chaos monsters were a problem. So you literally could normal summon your DD Warrior Lady if you drew it attack your opponent's monster, yes, you would take the damage, but you get rid of the problem. You banish that problem, and you don't have to deal with it anymore. So with Jinzo, BLS, you know, Chaos Emperor Dragon, whatever, yes, you take the damage, but you get rid of that problem. On top of that, she is a light attribute. So do keep in mind in this deck, as I profile it, the light and dark attribute ratio, because I try to keep that very balanced like they did back in the day, and from when I remember playing it. Next to Kaiku, the Ghost Destroyer. This card was amazing. You could remove fodder for light and dark targets. So if your opponent you knew was running BLS or Chaos Emperor Dragon or whatever, even down the road, the fact of the matter was you could remove light and dark targets from their graveyard, thus making these cards like BLS and Chaos Emperor Dragon dead. At the same time, they couldn't use Chaos Emperor Dragon or BLS while this card was on the field because you couldn't banish things from your graveyard. So if they top deck a BLS where Chaos Emperor Dragon or whatever, they couldn't banish from the graveyard even if they wanted to because of Kaiku's effect. So Kaiku was also a dark target. So those three reasons are the reason you run Kaiku. Dark target, got light and darkness fodder out of the graveyard and banished things that were annoying, and prevented things like BLS and Chaos Emperor Dragon from hitting the field. So in the mirror match, Kaiku was a god back then. Next you run 2, Magician of Faith. Magician of Faith, I believe, was at 2 or 3 at the time. My mind does deceive me. I mean, this was a format that happened over 10 years ago. I think, like, what now? 13 years ago? This format happened, so that was a long time ago. But Magician of Faith was very good. You had so many powerful spells that you could add back to your hand in this format. I mean, I'm just going to show you very quickly. You got Creature Swap, Premature Burial, Monster Reborn, Snatch and Steal, Confiscation, Forceful Sensually, Delinquent Duo, MST at 3, Harpy's Feather Duster, Heavy Storm, Regeki, Dark Hole, Painful Choice, Mirage of Nightmare, Discard Art, Graceful Charity, Pile to Greed. That's literally half the deck. And half those cards are banned or were banned or limited. So this card at the time was a powerful card because you got re-add Pot of Greed, re-add Graceful Charity, whatever you really wanted you could do. So Magician of Faith was a god. Literally. You set it, you flip it, you get any card you want. Next, because I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this deck is a control variation of Chaos Swarm. So it's a turbo variation, but it also has a control element with things like Yatagarasu and Danzaluk. Because with Forceful Confiscation, Delinquent Duo, and Forceful Sentry, you're literally manipulating your opponent's hand. Back in the day, that was something I always liked putting into my decks from back then, is a control element. Before the ban list kind of hit a lot of those control element cards. But pretty much what you used to do is you used to control your opponent's hand, whittle them down from 6 cards to 3 to 2 cards, and pretty much went from there. And Danzaluk, if you were Geki'd or Dark Hold their field and they had no back row, you attack with Don, whip another card out of their hand. Maybe you had a Forceful Sentry that turn, you whip another card out of their hand. You're kind of whittling down on resources, so it's very nice. And Danzaluk was a very good card. Also, he's a dark attribute. Do keep that in mind. So, control aspect. Next, you run your 1 Shining Angel and your 1 Reflect Bounder. I'm just going to go with these 2 guys because there's a lot of 1-ofs in the deck I do run. So Shining Angel could help search out your DD Warrior Lady, which was nice. So if they destroyed Shining Angel, you could search out DD Warrior Lady, then take care of the problem, normal summon another monster, or maybe swing for the fences. So that was one thing you could do. Also, Shining Angel was a light target. Reflect Bounder, on the other hand, was a decent card on itself. I think it did come out of Invasion of Chaos, I forget, as a secret run ulti or something, I forget. But Reflect Bounder was a light target as well. 17 attack, respectable. Its effect was very nice because if they attacked it, they took the damage, but at the end of the turn, Reflect Bounder died. So, you know, because I'll read you its effect very quickly, it's very interesting. Before damage calculation, if this card is being attacked by your opponent's monster and was face up in attack position, at the start of the damage step, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attacking monster's attack. So they literally take the damage from attacking this. If you do, after damage calculation, destroy this card. That is very nice, as well as, I mean, it's a light target engrave, so that's another thing that's nice about it. Next up we have, oh gosh, your Tribe Infecting Virus and your Sinister Serpent. Sinister Serpent pre-errata, I should mention, so that's the original text right there, the original print of the card actually. But Sinister Serpent was pretty damn good. you could just keep re-adding it to your hand. And with Tribe Infecting Virus, I mean, it was literally a Regeki where you pretty much normal summon a monster, Regeki their field, and then get this back to your hand. It was literally just Regeki their field for no reason if you had these two in your hand. But Sinister Serpent was also good if, as it's more known back, when you get the Scapegoat format, is that you can Metamorphosis. Both of these are water targets, so they didn't really carry that much into the deck. What I'm saying by that is literally they didn't matter really. Also, Regeki, recurring damage. Like sometimes I used to use this as a battle stopper even. So sorry about that. I had something in my throat when I was talking. But they work out pretty well. Next you have your one Breaker. Breaker was at 1 at the time. Breaker, break back row, the old saying goes. You normal summon your Breaker, you break their back row, and on top of that, he's a 19 beater, amazing. And on top of that, he's a dark attribute. So multiple things play into this card being very good in the deck. Next you run your Witch of the Black Forest and Sangan. The fact that there's searchers for just pretty much everything in the deck is amazing, but on top of that, the fact of the matter is that they're both dark targets, so if you wanted to say, banish for, Chaos Emperor Dragon or BLS, that's added bonus to it. So searchers and dark targets make good fodder. Next, the last card you run is the one Yatagarasu. Yatagarasu is amazing. Hands down amazing card just in general. You didn't have to just summon the Chaos Emperor Dragon and then go into the Yata lock. If you had cleared the board and back row, you could just poke them. Which one of my friends, when I dueled him recently, I got him in the Yata lock by just doing that. I Regeki'd his field, a Harpy's Feather Duster his back row, and I summoned Yata and I just poked him to death. So Yata was just a good control card. On top of that, there were other ways to get in the Yata lock. Then I run some spells. I run one creature swap. It works well. If you didn't have you had a Sinister Serpent and they had a BLS, you just go creature swap, steal your monster. Stupid, but yeah, you could do that. And other ways you could do that. And it was a way of stealing big boss monsters back then. So like a Jinzo or something like that was really nice. That's all they had on their field. Next, Premature Burial and Monster Reborn are your two Reborn cards, both currently banned when I'm making this video. Premature Burial, amazing card. Original prints of these guys. Well, not this one, excuse me, this one I had. Actually, no, this is the original print from LOB, I forgot. But literally what you could do with these two guys are pretty much you go Premature Burial, reoccur things, your Sangan, your Witch of the Black Forest, tribute it off for maybe a card. Back in the day, that's some things you used to do like with your Jinzo or Summon Skull or whatever. But in here, it was just to help bring back different cards that you could bring back and just beat over your opponent with. Or just if you knew they were you on the defensive, you could bring back like a Witch or a Sangan, get a search off, maybe go into something else. But very, very powerful cards. Next you run Snatch and Steal, first edition I've had since I was a kid. This card's amazing. As you guys remember when this card came back a couple formats ago, like a year or so ago, this card is still good. You steal your Chaos Emperor Dragon, your opponent's Chaos Emperor Dragon, your BLS. It's an amazing top deck. I mean, it's a great card. Then you run your Control Element and spells, your Confiscation, your Delinquent Duo, your Forceful Sentry, and your Confiscation. Adds back to the deck, amazing. Rip a card out of your opponent's hand, amazing. Take 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, amazing, by paying 1,000 life points. Also, I should mention, however, that if you're going to activate these cards, sometimes I find that it's best to, if they've already had Sinister Serpent in the grave, then activate these cards for the most benefit. But sometimes that doesn't really matter. It's just it's wishy-washy sometimes to do that. But it's sometimes best because sometimes they'll discard a Sinister Serpent. Maybe you hit a Sinister Serpent, that sucks. But because Sinister Serpent has 1, do you want to take that risk of just wrecking your opponent's hand or being afraid of nagging yourself? So it's up to you, decide upon the situation and the way you think the duel is going to when activate these cards. But yeah, very, very, very powerful cards. Next you run your 3 MST. MST was at 3 at one point before the ban list. When the 2004 ban list came along, this was limited down to 1 and stayed at 1 all the way into the Synchro era of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it was a very powerful card, and Breaker and him pretty much both were at 1, and pretty much your best back removal with Heavy for a while. But the reason we also run MST at 3 of is for this card right here, Mirage of Nightmare, which works well with Heavy Storm, I should mention, because Heavy Storm does work with Mirage of Nightmare as well. So Mirage of Nightmare is pretty interesting. It's a card that's now on the ban list for an obvious reason, as I'll read here. During your opponent's standby phase, draw cards until you have 4 cards in hand. During your standby phase, randomly discard the same number of cards you drew with this card's effect to the grave. So during your standby phase, you draw 4. Alright? You could chain MST, negate all that. All those cards, you know, you don't get the effect to discard 4 cards. You just gain a +2 because you drew 4 cards deeper into your deck, yes, but you went MST, that's 2, minus those 2 because of the 2 you drew, you know, optimally. Now sometimes I sometimes went for a +1, if depending upon if I really was trying to dig for my deck into my deck for something. But this combo is amazing with MST and Mirage of Nightmare. It's ridiculous how good that card is. I'm happy it's not back. Next you have your back row removal, your Heavy Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster. You didn't have Starlight Road back then. You didn't have, you know, anything like that. You had to just say goodbye to your back row. So Harpy's Feather Duster and Heavy Storm are very, very powerful cards back then. Original prints of the card, by the way. Next you have your 1 Regeki and your 1 Dark Hole. This is monster removal for your deck. Regeki and Dark Hole, pretty simple. Both of them were at 1 at the time. Next you have some ways of setting up your graveyard for your BLS fodder and your Chaos Emperor Dragon fodder. Card destruction, it sometimes was useful to just thin through your deck, set up your graveyard. Say I didn't get the best hand, I set the traps I want or whatever I wanted, activate this card, send the other cards to the graveyard. Maybe I draw into something better, maybe I get a BLS, maybe I can just swarm the field because I have lights and darks engraved. It's really nice overall. Painful Choice is broken in this deck. You go Painful Choice, choose Light and Darks, you get one of those cards, the rest go into your graveyard, and if you have a BLS or a Chaos Emperor Dragon in your opening hand with a Painful Choice, you win. I haven't lost if I've ever done that. It's just a very broken card, Painful Choice, back in the day. Can't believe it was a super back then. Next you have your Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, your Holy Trinity right here, part of your Holy Trinity of cards back in the day. Pot of Greed, what does it do? It draws 2. Graceful Charity was broken in this deck also because the fact of the matter was, if you go Graceful Charity, draw your cards. Oh, look, I have some extra light and darks in my grave, but I drew into that BLS. Let's send some lights and darks to the grave, setting up the graveyard for your BLS or Chaos Emperor Dragon. So Graceful Charity was a little bit more broken, I feel like, some days than Pot of Greed, because you could set up plays if you drew into the right thing. But Pot of Greed overall was the better card. So depending upon the day, Graceful could be better than Pot in this deck. Next up, we run Ring of Destruction, Torrential Tribune, Call of the Haunted. Just good cards. Ring of Destruction pre-errata was very good. It ends games. Torrential was good. Call of the Haunted was at 1. They were all good cards. And the last trap card you run is Imperial Order, because the fact of the matter was Imperial Order was broken, and even in today's game this card would be broken because you literally could negate spells and you could turn it off when you wanted to, which was amazing. Kind of like Royal Oppression. But I hope you guys all enjoyed this deck profile. It's a very fun, old school deck. It's very, very powerful still. I hope you kept count of how many banned and limited cards on the ban list prior these cards were. I mean, it's a pretty penny of them. But it's a very fun deck. If you wanted to play it for fun, the deck is somewhat more expensive than other old school decks to play because the Chaos Emperor Dragon, I think, is like 25 at the most. Everything else, however, is fairly cheap besides Delinquent Duo. But it probably costs you 60 bucks, I'd say, total. $60 to $50 to build this deck if you wanted to in today's game. It's very fun to play with your friends, though. But till next time, guys, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling, and I hope you enjoyed this old school deck profile. Take care, everybody.